Too many tears have been shed. Too much blood has been shed. All of us have a responsibility to work for the day when the mothers of Israelis and Palestinians can see their children grow up without fear. When the Holy Land of the three great faiths is the place of peace that God intended it to be. When Jerusalem is a secure and lasting home for Jews and Christians and Muslims, and a place for all of the children of Abraham to mingle peacefully together, as in the story of Isra. As in the story of Isra, when Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them, joined in prayer.
Tolerance, tension, tears, and blood. President Obama covered it all today. He spoke in Cairo, Egypt, but he was talking to the world, specifically the Muslim world, but also to Jews, Christians, and just about everybody else. So much to cover here. That's why we're bringing our guest back. Zainab Salbi is the founder and CEO of Women for Women International, pretty incredible organization. Also Hussein Rashid, he's a blogger for religiondispatches.org. And Soumaya Khalifa is the executive director of the Islamic Speakers Bureau here in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, Soumaya, you've got the emphasis on religion and faith and multi-faith. I mean, talk about a brilliant speechwriter to fold in the story of Isra, yes?
Absolutely incredible.
And tell me why, from a Muslim's perspective, why that story specifically was a very powerful move.
It was a very powerful move in terms of taking the time and putting in the effort to draw into Islamic history and Islamic culture and what is important to Muslims. It's not just like, you know, let's come together and talk, but to make reference to the Islamic history piece. And I think that carried a lot of weight for Muslims in general.
And when you talk about Islamic history and religion, that folds perfectly into how the president is wanting to deal with the tensions of Iran, tensions with regard to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Hussein, let me ask you, and pick either Iran or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Did he achieve what you think he wanted to achieve when addressing what he called two very big tensions for him?
I think from a policy perspective, he definitely did, specifically with respect to Iran. The attempted coup of Mossadegh in 1953 is a sore point for Iranians, and the fact that he was able to acknowledge it and say, we are willing to meet with Iranians as equal partners is an incredibly important statement for an American president to make. And really, he's really put the onus on Iran now to come around and say, okay, we really want to be partners for peace now. And I think the religious language he used is really important as well. The selections from the Quran he used talk about affirming Islam as part of the Jewish and Christian revelatory tradition as well. And reminding Muslims, you know, if you're listening to this as a Muslim, it really reminds Muslims that we are part of a larger faith community as well. So Iran can't go around denying the Holocaust without ignoring the verse from the Quran that President Obama cited. Be conscious of God and always speak the truth, which comes in reference to the end of the Cain and Abel story. You know, do not commit fratricide. Do not kill your brothers. And so there's certain resonances that he was able to build in, both directly addressing Iran and indirectly addressing Iran. And I think he delivered the message just masterfully.
So Zainab, is religion the way to touch a pulse here when it comes to violence, political strife, and death and destruction there in the Middle East?
I think it needs to be addressed. We have in the Middle East two contradictions between very strong Islamic movement at the street level and between what is often seen by the population and authoritarian regimes. And he was actually able to address both sides. He's talking about democracy and the need for transparent governments and an inclusive government was actually a very good way of appealing to the governments of the Middle East and addressing the population needs for more democracy in the Middle East. In the meantime, he also was very clear about violence is not the way to go. He was very smart to distinguish Hamas's role, particularly that you need to be open in here for dialogue, for discussions in a way that got Hamas leaders giving good reviews or at least positive reviews in terms of their speech. So there is a way, actually he handled the whole issue of we need democracy and we need openness as the way to go and not add violence. It was a very smart way of addressing both the government as well as the Islamic groups there.
Interesting that you talk about the issue of democracy. Hussein, before we roll into our next section of subject matter, since Zainab brought it up, you know, that's been one of the biggest controversies, is that the U.S. president has always tried to force countries in the Middle East to be democratic when history hasn't always been that way. And that's been a big tug of war, is don't make us be what you want us to be.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that it's not always forcing. You know, America has not always forced democracy on other countries. It is, in fact, tried to espouse its values. You know, when Reverend John Winthrop said it, when President Kennedy said it, when Secretary of State Clinton said it, to be a shining beacon on a hill in describing America, the idea was that we as a country would represent ourselves as a moral exemplar that people would want to be. We've had periods where we've tried to force freedom and democracy on others, and that strikes me as a bit odd, trying to force freedom on other people. At the same time, we also prop up despotic regimes like the Mubarak regime, like the certain other royal families in the Middle East. And, you know, so we do have this conflicting notion. I think what President Obama did today was wonderful, which was to say, we are going to go back to being that shining beacon on a hill, that shining city on the hill, and we are going to show you a way that we think is a good way, and we want you to be democratic in your way, but not in name only. So
well, we're going to talk more about that oppression. That's going to be the next key item we're going to key in on. So Hussein, Soumaya, Zainab, stay with me. We want to talk about women's rights in the Muslim world. It's a key talking point in the president's speech. Matter of fact, apparently he wrote that part of the speech, and it demands a lot more conversation. We're going to push forward with our guests and read between the lines. We're going to hear more from them next hour. Also, take terminal patients, desperate and